The Red Wizard's Gambit by Thomas Bradford. The air was humid. Tracks of molten lava flowed through jagged cracks in the black rocks, and heavy drops of rain fell on the small group of men ascending the volcano's base. The water did nothing for the palpable heat, as a sheen of sweat was visible on each gloomy face, save for one. Leading the procession was a unique figure. Dressed in a hooded cloak of vibrant crimson, the hood's interior was hidden in a natural shadow from which two sharp, golden eyes gleamed, two glittering points shining with evil intelligence, lights in the void. If the wizard had a face, no mortal man had ever laid eyes upon it. The wizard's boots crunched to a stop in the loose rocks. He tilted his head, gazing up at the mountain's peak. Liquid death flowed from the summit, lava oozing over the cusp in a sluggish boil. The simmering eruption would provide the energy needed for his ritual. He said nothing as he turned to his men, merely waved an emaciated arm forward before resuming the climb. His men followed, one of them leading a line of malnourished prisoners, their naked bodies connected with chains. Every potent ritual needed a sacrifice. The captive at the end of the line stumbled, falling to one knee. The sharp crack of a whip sounded, and he scrambled to his feet, his fellow prisoners watching without a sound, the light in their eyes long dead. The wizard kept his back to the group, his eyes fixed upon their goal. There was a place, close to the summit, hidden from view as of yet, but he knew it was there. Removing a sheet of yellow parchment from the pouch at his side, the wizard gently unfolded it and held it in front of his face, staring at an artist's depiction of the same volcano, rendered in fine detail. He lowered the page, the drawing itself replaced with its real-life counterpart. On the page was an arrow pointing to their destination, with words written beside it in a language few would have been able to decipher, but the wizard knew them well. Ancient Circle. Forbidden Magic. There were other words on the page, but those were the ones he had fixated on, hiding away in his underground retreat, living a coward's existence for years as he dreamed of one day exacting revenge on those who had driven him into exile. Desperately he had searched for any method, any power, any available means of raining destruction on his enemies. Poring through books and scrolls line by line, he absorbed every word and diagram, leaving a melted legion of dead candles in his wake. The cryptic writings had led him into the depths of malign magics both powerful and destructive. For years he had searched, and had learned many things. His formidable powers were bolstered with the ancient knowledge, but none of it was good enough. None of the spells would spark his redemption from disgrace, or herald his return to the tyranny he had once commanded. What he needed was an ally, a being as powerful as himself, something tangible that could flank his enemies as he moved in for the kill. Unfortunately, his colleagues were all gone, perished fleeing before the storm at their heels, the tornado of self-righteous fury from those who had sought justice. His cold heart vowed revenge. Thus it was, at the bottom of a stack of crumbling parchment, he had found a possibility. It was a summoning ritual, not only dangerous, but difficult, tricky, even for the best of warlocks. The location and timing had to be precise, the scrawled directions indicating a specific hour and place. Pictures illustrated the proper alignment of celestial bodies, an event that occurred once every 100 years. He placed the parchment back in the pouch and continued the climb, the prisoner's chains rattling behind him. The ground was steep, the lava trails were everywhere, interweaving in places like palm lines that the wizard carefully stepped over with long strides of his spindly legs. At one point a prisoner, the same man who had stumbled before, slipped on the rocks and fell. The whip came instantly, striking flesh, and the man moaned, but was unable to rise. A circle of captors surrounded the prisoner, delivering kicks and curses, but nothing could rouse him. The Red Wizard stopped, and without turning, spoke in a whisper that cut through the noise, silencing all at once. "Kill him." One of his men produced a dagger, and the wizard spun around, his angry eyes flashing impatience.
"You fool," he hissed. "I said get rid of him."
The wizard started forward, his men shrinking from his presence as he approached. Shoving the man with the small blade aside, the wizard reached down and grabbed the prisoner beneath his arms, lifting him with an ease that belied the sorcerer's frail appearance. Hunched over the limp form, the wizard flung the body into the molten river of one of the lava trails. The prisoner gave a startled shriek before bursting aflame, disappearing beneath the current. The captives nearest the executed man suddenly came to life, not due to the sudden or heinous nature of the killing, but because they were still linked by the chain. The woman who had been next in line screamed as the metal restraint threatened to drag her into the fiery death as well. She pulled and fought, the others behind her doing the same until the submerged link slowly melted and the chain slackened. The wizard turned away in silence, his men following with uneasy glances. Those bound moved with fresh purpose, the woman at the rear desperate to avoid contact with the molten end of the chain trailing behind her. Halfway up the volcano, the wizard's luminous eyes picked out the figure of a man, standing motionless on the slope above them. The wizard got within speaking distance and stopped, regarding the man with an air of disdain. A featureless cloth mask covered the stranger's head, with 2 slits for eyes and 1 for his mouth, telling the wizard all that he needed to know. He had seen such masks before. A prophet, it meant. One of doom or destiny, the wizard wondered. Dark clouds had formed overhead, the dull rumble of lightning flickering within their dense bodies, thunderheads looming over the volcano's peak. The hour was fast approaching. Soon the mountainside would be flooded in scalding currents, and the wizard did not mean to be caught in them.
"Prophet," the wizard rasped, "what brings you here?"
The prophet's tone was a lament of anguish. "Crimson Wizard," his voice trembled, "the end draws near."
"A prophet of doom, then."
The wizard said,
"Of whose end do you speak? Mine?"
"Yours, mine, everyone's, the end of us all." The wizard felt the tension of his men behind him. The moment was ominous. The volcano's vibrations grew more intense, like the far-off sound of crashing waves. The wizard's chuckle was dry and thin, the sound of many bones rattling.
"I ask you again, why have you come?"
Despite his laughter, the wizard's tone held no mirth.
"Your death is guaranteed in this place."
"Precisely," the prophet said. "My end will be here. I have seen it, thus I am compelled. By vision, by fate. I seek you out at this time, in this place, to warn you that something comes, a terrible force that will bring death and destruction."
"That is my intention," the wizard replied. "The righteous powers that be have laid claim to these lands. I mean to bring forth an entity that will deliver them back to me."
The prophet nodded, the movement itself filled with sorrow despite the blank mask. "Yes," he sighed, placing a hand to his head, caressing the smooth cloth. "I have seen this. I understand now. This entity is to serve you, then?"
"Indeed."
The wizard crossed his arms over his chest.
"It will be the servant, and I its master. Every instruction I've studied has confirmed this. Rest assured, I have given years of consideration for this moment."
"And have you not considered that perhaps you are meddling in something beyond your understanding?" Shaking his head, the wizard answered,
"I have not. Regardless, there is no other option left to me. I must do this, or die trying, and you will not stop me."
Displaying no further interest in the prophet, the red wizard continued to climb. The prophet fell in behind the collective as they passed, doing little except whisper to himself and ring a small chime. The other men pretended he wasn't there. At last they reached the location. 2/3 up the volcano side there was an alcove hollowed by human hands. Statues grew from the rock walls, crumbling remnants of divine figures wearing tortured expressions, their arms lifted to the heavens in hopeless appeal. A circle of stone slabs was situated around the area's center, an altar of clouded marble sitting within. There was a feeling to the place, a certain enmity. The wizard sensed it, and it invigorated him. This was unholy ground. The wizard's slanted eyes regarded everyone as they entered the summoning circle. Once they were inside, he pulled a red stone from his pouch. Holding it forward, he spat a quick incantation. A transparent barrier shimmered into existence at the edge of the ritual space, the air distorting as seen through imperfect glass, a clear dome extending from the rock foundation to well over their heads, enclosing everyone inside. Shelter from the coming torrent. They were sealed in. Nothing could enter, and no one could leave. One of the wizard's men reached out and touched the distorted layer and found it solid, smooth but impenetrable. The wizard commanded the sacrifices be led around the altar, placed intermittently between the standing slabs of stone. His men moved to obey. Some of the prisoners resisted, the flame of self-preservation reigniting somewhere deep in their souls, all of them knowing in their hearts that it was too late, but unwilling to face their end without struggle. They were beaten unconscious and dragged in place regardless. The moment was nigh. The wizard moved with dexterity, placing objects on the altar: shards of amaranth stone, chunks of moon rock, the petrified skull of a newborn. Directly in the center, he placed a blackened heart. Slicing open his forearm, he dipped a finger in the dark trail that flowed and used it to draw lines connecting the objects to the heart, taking great care with each stroke, working with quiet precision. The prophet stood off to the side, saying nothing, his blank mask fixed on the figure of the wizard hunched over the altar. The wizard finished the last mark with a frenzied flourish, thrusting his hand into his bag and pulling out the crimson stone again. The object began to glow and pulse as he held it aloft, its light fading in and out like a smoldering ember.
"Be ready," he shouted to his men.
Daggers were brought out, hands grasped heads of hair and pulled, the prisoners' throats were exposed. The earth shook violently, and it was hard for the men to keep their feet. Each pair of eyes was directed at the wizard, knives held at the ready as the men waited for the word. The wizard was chanting, his voice lost in the deafening rumble as he brandished the stone, the red pulsing faster, faster, shining with increasing intensity. Nothing showed from the darkness inside his hood. His eyes were closed. Lightning flashed. Forked tongues struck down from sinister clouds in an image of unsettling beauty. The dark heavens gathered over the mountain in prelude to the coming destruction. The volcano erupted. The sound was an annihilating explosion, a crash of earth-shattering force as lava spewed from the summit, coming down on them in splashing waves. The currents washed over the outside of the barrier, draping everything inside in an orange haze that blocked out the rest of the world. Nothing existed outside the invisible wall. The world inside was now the only one that mattered. The wizard thrust the pulsing stone higher and shouted, "Now!" The blades did their work. Skin parted in soundless motions, and lifeblood was released, gushing forth from the dying sacrifices. But instead of splattering on the rocks, it flowed on invisible currents, the wizard's stone sucking it all up with greed. The stone's light ceased to blink, becoming a steady, deep red. Dark and dangerous, it emitted scarlet electricity that ignited and burst upon the altar. Arcing currents shot from the stone, converging over the blackened heart, feeding into a light growing there. The glow from the lava outside the barrier dimmed, its luster fading as the stone stole its light, its energy, and channeled that as well. The wizard fought to keep his arms steady as the stone tried to break free. He stared straight into the crimson glow above the altar, his chanting words lost to his own ears.
"Come forth," his thoughts commanded.
The light was a portal, the birthing place for a new terror. The wizard would use it to tear the world asunder.
"Come forth."
It was close now. Soon the demon would arrive, carried across dimensions unknown, to be set loose upon this world.
"Come forth."
Just before the light reached a point where even the wizard must look away, it happened. The shadowy outline of a figure emerged inside the glow, becoming solid as the light intensified. The wizard threw an arm over his eyes as the light itself erupted, washing over everything in a rush of howling wind before disappearing at once. Everything was quiet, the sound of the rumbling volcano muffled by the insulating barrier. The wizard lowered his arm. Immediately he felt a rush of disappointment. Whatever creature he had been expecting, the figure standing in the place where the altar had previously been was not it.
"What is this?" he thought.
It was a man wearing a suit colored a light shade of blue. The material was frayed, smudged with grime and dirt. His pallid face regarded them with a sardonic smile as he adjusted the knot of his tie. The wizard had never seen such attire. His eyes were drawn to an odd pin placed over the man's breast pocket, patterns of red, white, and blue.
"You're not a demon," the wizard stated.
The man's smile grew wider. The murderous grin reflected in his eyes gave the wizard pause, prompting him to second-guess his words. Everything about the man was unassuming. His dress shoes were scuffed and dirty, covered in a layer of dust that made it impossible to imagine they had ever been shiny. A thin layer of graying, greasy hair covered some of his head, slicked back but not enough to hide his baldness. His skin was dotted with liver spots. Nothing about him looked dangerous. In fact, he looked exactly the opposite, soft and sickly. But that smile, the derangement in the eyes. Something was off in there. Something wasn't right. The dancing eyes darted among the men in silence, and there was an uneasiness in the air. The wizard repeated himself, this time with anger, frustration that the years he had spent preparing for this moment had seemingly ended in farce.
"What are you?" he demanded.
The man coughed. Phlegm in his throat gurgled, becoming laughter. He looked up at the magic barrier, still teeming with lava, which had regained its vibrant hue, then lowered his jaundiced eyes to the wizard's. The jarring voice which came from his mouth was filled with glee as he said, "Well, Toto, I guess we're not in fucking Kansas anymore, huh?" The wizard started. This man was indeed not what he seemed, he realized. It was the voice, sarcastic, snarling, laced with a lunacy matching his expression. Every instinct told the wizard he was dealing with something sinister here. Looking closely at the bland figure, however, he dared not get his hopes up. "You'll have to excuse my appearance," the man explained. "This body is absolutely riddled with damage, a little wear and tear. I have a penchant, you see, for being around when bad shit goes down." He barked a crazed laugh. "When the bombs finally dropped, I thought I was a goner." The wizard got his throat working. "What? Am I? Just a civil servant, my red friend. A man proud of one nation, under God. Through hypocrisy it stands. Ha! Stood, rather. I ran that place into the ground, and the rest of the free world along with it. It took some doing, but by God, in the end I got 'em. I'd like to thank my mother, my country, and my third wife, all dead now. May they rot in peace." "I don't understand." "Of course you don't. Pardon me, I'm just a little excited to be here. You don't know just how boring it had gotten back there. The White House isn't exactly prime real estate these days. The walls have suffered a little damage, you see. They're a little rickety. Not much for neighbors either. Chatting with corpses loses its charm after a while. As for who I am, let me see if I still got a card." The man reached into his breast pocket and fished out a flappy rectangular piece of paper, its thick stalk so eroded it was like tissue paper. It fluttered to the ground. "Ah, screw it," the man cackled. "I digress anyway. This body once belonged to a man named Bill Jones, a pathetic sack, bland and boring in every way possible, working a government desk job, going through a third divorce, trying to get part-time custody of his kids. A real loser is what I'm saying. But one day that all changed. His government position sometimes afforded him access to certain things kept under wraps from the general public. One day he's touring some top-secret facility and he comes across a frozen specimen, a cryogenic anomaly. From space, you see. One of the seals came loose, and the rest is history. Poor Bill's mind was tainted by this otherworldly creatures, and they merged. They became something else, something neither boring old Bill nor ancient alien life form." The man extended his arms with a shrug. "And here I am," he grinned. "I must say, it's been a blast." The wizard was trying to follow the man's words. Much of it was gibberish to him, but he had pieced together enough to surmise one important thing. "So this world of yours is no longer—" The man snorted. "Oh, it's still there. Doing fine in the grand scheme of things. If you're talking about the people, well, they're fucked. The planet's surface is obliterated, a wasteland covered in so much radioactive dust. Anyone left alive are clinging to a pathetic existence in small pockets around the globe, but they're doomed to die soon anyway. Mankind is, shall we say, on its way out. All thanks to yours truly."
"How did you accomplish this?"
"You'd be surprised how easily those in power can be influenced. The gift of persuasion is ever one of my specialties. A few lies here, some half-truths there. Spread a little misinformation, then sit back and watch the tribal freak show that is humanity turn on itself. Nothing like a little paranoia to tighten the finger holding the trigger. And I had access to all sorts of secret toys. A couple drops of military-grade contagions on the wind, and you can take bets on how quickly civilized societies collapse." The man's eyes appeared wistful, lost in a reverie of chaos. "I've wanted to go back and do it all over again for so long now," he sighed. "You don't know how boring it's been, how long I've waited." The wizard considered the strange man's words. Perhaps the ritual hadn't been for nothing after all. If he could harness this creature's ability for sowing corruption and discord, his enemies would stand no chance of persevering. It was simply a matter of establishing rules. The wizard was suddenly elated.
"Perfect," he said. "I couldn't have asked for a better outcome. You will serve me well, demon."
The prophet interrupted, speaking for the first time since entering the ritual space. "You don't understand the danger you're in. The ruin you brought upon us all."
The wizard turned to face him. "What are you saying?" he hissed. "How can I be in danger? This thing cannot harm me. The terms of the ritual guarantee as such. I have brought it here of my own power, and it will do as I say."
The prophet shook his head. "Precisely. You have brought it here. You and your men are responsible, and will be the first to die. The rest of this world will follow." Fire ignited around the wizard's right arm, licks of flame dripping as he prepared to let it fly at the prophet's head, but the demon spoke before he could, his snarling voice crooning. "Your mystical friend is right, you know. You and your men will die here."
"Impossible!" the wizard shouted.
The enveloping flame surrounding his hands sputtered.
"You pose me no threat. You can't raise a hand against me. You are mine to command."
The demon sneered. "In your dreams, wizard."
"You will serve me."
One of the wizard's henchmen suddenly began to cough, clutching his throat as he doubled over. All eyes went to him, and the prophet let out a low moan, falling to his knees in prayer. Another man joined the first, hacking up blood and vomit as he quickly lost consciousness. He fell to the ground, where he shook and then was still. Fear gripped the wizard's heart, true terror the likes of which he had never felt. The demon watched his expression change with measured amusement. "Something I forgot to mention," the demon whispered, his sickly eyes twinkling. "Any fool back where I came from would have guessed from my appearance, but I see things work a little different here. Maybe your bodies work differently. But not different enough, though. Too bad." The wizard's throat tightened. His body was racked with pain. Chest burning, lungs failing, his stomach roiled as if 1,000 worms were trapped inside. His vision faltered.
"What?"
he managed to gasp. "As far as I know, I can't die," the demon continued. "You can gut me, incinerate me, infect me, but I will remain." He coughed, clearing his throat, retaining his composure with a glittering smile. "I admit this body's seen better days. Being immortal doesn't guarantee a clean bill of health, unfortunately. I tend to pick up things here and there, spread 'em around. I'm ground zero for pandemics, you know. 1,000 plagues, diseases, all perfected, all housed within my flesh, to travel with me wherever I go." The wizard's men were on the ground, some already dead, all bleeding from mouth and nostrils or convulsing in seizures. The wizard's legs gave and he fell, his body trembling, his gold eyes radiating with worry. The demon continued to speak, but the words barely registered in the wizard's wavering consciousness. "In summoning me, you have assured your kind's destruction, along with your own." Approaching the wizard, the demon extended a pale hand, grabbing the sorcerer's red cloak. "Congratulations." The prophet was dead. Cries from the others were tapering off. The suited man pulled a pair of sunglasses from inside his jacket. Red aviator lenses colored the dark maroon of congealed blood. As he donned them, the wizard thought he could see strange things in their reflection. Flying contraptions, bursts of flame, clouds, colossal clouds, like mushrooms. And death. Death and suffering. But the red wizard couldn't be certain, not of anything anymore. His vision was dying, along with the rest of him. The demon spoke one final time, to no one in particular. "Gentlemen," he announced, straightening his lapels, "I've arrived." Cursing his fate, the wizard slipped into a coma. The base of the volcano was hidden, invisible in a thick cloud of ash that would remain for several months. Through the smoke came the dark outline of a lone figure dragging a body in tow. Scuffed dress shoes crunched loose rocks as the figure left the volatile mountain behind. The figure stopped, his frayed silk tie swaying in the wind as he took stock of his surroundings, judging himself to be a safe distance from the eruption. He let go of the wizard's red cloak, and the comatose body fell away without a sound. The protective barrier had followed the wizard's body down the mountainside, slowly becoming thinner as his life ebbed away. Now the barrier disappeared completely. The wizard was dead. Immediately, the harsh smoke and drifting embers flooded the space around the demon, who coughed and spat before reaching down and unfastening the wizard's cloak. Draping it around his own shoulders, the man continued his stride with a joyous grin. Another world, another opportunity for chaos and destruction, for deception and lies. He couldn't wait. Disappearing into the distance in a haze of dark smoke, this terror from another place walked the land. An agent of doom, recklessly unleashed upon an unsuspecting world. The end.